Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, and you can see him every weekday at 5:30 Eastern on NBC-SN. He joins us now. I didn't know I was going to have all these things to talk to you about, Mike. I love talking to you. And all of a sudden, Jimmy Graham's argument to be paid as a wide receiver while calling himself a tight end, is this going to be used against him in this hearing?
Well, I think it's being used against him from a PR standpoint, and I've noticed over the last week or two, Dan, some efforts to paint him as greedy and unreasonable. Look, this is a guy who has said nothing over the last 4 years of his career in an effort to get a new contract. And when the Patriots gave Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez in a fairly tight time frame back in 2012, big money deals after their second NFL seasons, and back then you could, guys drafted before 2011, you can give them new contracts after 2 years. Graham was drafted in 2010. He could have gotten a new contract after 2 years. He never said a word. He's never done anything. All he's doing now is taking advantage of language in the collective bargaining agreement that allows a guy to say, look, if you're going to use the franchise tag on me, I get the tag at the position where I participated in the most plays last year. And even though I'm a tight end, I call myself a tight end, you call me a tight end, I'm a Pro Bowl tight end, I line up more as a receiver than I do as a tight end. And under the language of the labor deal, I'm entitled to $12.3 million for this year instead of $7 million. It's that simple. It's a basic business proposition, and we'll find out whether or not that language means that when he lines up in the slot, he's counted as a receiver.
Which side would be easier for you to argue as a lawyer?
I think the side that he's a receiver, because what is a tight end? A tight end is a guy who lines up tight to the end. And if you're in the slot, you're a receiver. You're Wes Welker, you're Anquan Bolden, you're Hines Ward. You are a receiver. And as a practical matter, I'd say to the NFL, hey, when you were renegotiating this collective bargaining agreement in 2011, you knew that there were some loopholes. You knew about the Terrell Suggs case where the Ravens fought over whether or not he was a defensive end or a linebacker. You could have put language in there to address this, because in 2011 it was already obvious the tight end position has evolved to the point where pass-catching tight ends don't always line up tight to the tackle. They line up in the slot. They line up wide. And that language in the CBA allows you to go back, count up the snaps, and say, well, he lined up more times as a receiver than he did as a tight end.
Are we going to face this down the road with Jadeveon Clowney, who doesn't seem to be a guy defined by a position?
Potentially, but now here's the thing. The gap between defensive end and linebacker, not $5 million when you're talking about the franchise tag, but it's the same, because that's the thing. The Terrell Suggs situation came up. It went to a hearing. It was resolved before there was a final outcome, and the NFL and the NFLPA didn't fix this, and it could be fixed at any time. Now, for Graham, it wouldn't matter, but going forward, they get together, and they come up with a more specific formula for determining what a guy's franchise tag would be, and then it's fixed, and they don't have to go through this stuff in the future. But this ruling, however it turns out, is going to be very relevant, pending some agreement by the NFL and the NFLPA, to future tight ends who are more receiver than tight end.
Help me with this. We're talking to Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk. In a landmark decision, U.S. Patent Office cancels trademark for Redskins football team.
Yeah, this is something that's been 22 years in the making. There was an attack back in 1992 that had some initial success, but it failed on a technicality. This is the financial way, the initial financial way to impact the team nickname. You take away the federal trademark protection, and that means anyone and everyone, if they want, can sell materials bearing that name. And there's nothing that Dan Snyder can do about it. He can't send a cease and desist letter. He can't file legal action. He can't do anything to keep people from setting up shop right outside of FedEx Field trying to sell anything that infringes otherwise on his trademark. Now, will that cause him to change the name if this stands? Because there's going to be layers of appeals, and who knows what's ultimately going to happen and how long it's going to take. But having that ruling come now, at a time when the debate has gotten to the point where, Dan, it's not going away until the name changes, whether it's 5 months, 5 years, 50 years. The debate is going to continue. This ruling is going to give more fuel to the opposition, and it's going to put more pressure on the NFL to do something about it.
Yeah, I said until there's a financial impact, there's rarely change. And I didn't know if it was going to be advertisers who bow out. This might be sort of that loophole where you see some pressure there, and then Daniel Snyder eventually says, all right, I'll change because I want to be able to control all the merchandise here. The amount of money that would be at stake as well. It might be a positive for him eventually if he's forced to do this. You create a whole new revenue stream with more merchandise there. Is there a possibility Snyder is a businessman can see it that way, or because he's a billionaire, nobody's bullying me here?
Well, but that's where you have to eventually make an objective business decision. You have to look at all the factors, everything lining up against you, and you have to be honest with yourself. And you have to have people working for you who will be honest with you if you won't be honest with yourself. And you have to realize, I'm going to lose this name involuntarily at some point. So why not find a way to lose it voluntarily, declare victory even though I'm ultimately losing, and find a way to make some money off of this, whether it's with new jerseys, with new merchandise.
But who takes it away from him, Mike? Involuntarily, who's going to take it away from him?
Well, I think the NFL eventually would. And it wouldn't come to the NFL stripping the name. It would come down to, as many believe eventually will happen, Commissioner Roger Goodell and a handful of very influential owners going to Daniel Snyder and basically having the Richard Nixon speech where it's time to give it up. It's time to walk away. It's time to declare victory and retreat. And I think that Goodell, Dan, has been hoping for a lull.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lull is coming. It's like, hey, you know what? With each passing day, it's going to be harder and harder to make it look like you're doing it on your own terms. The reality is they're eventually going to be bowing to public pressure, and that pressure is getting greater and greater. And I think it's only going to get greater. I don't know where the tipping point is, but this ruling today could, depending upon what kind of momentum it catches, it could start that process toward the tipping point.
But how much money could the Redskins make, new revenue stream, on changing the nickname?
Well, that you can make. I mean, it all depends on how your fan base reacts to it, because you may have a bunch of fans who never buy anything with the new name, and continue to keep their old jerseys and continue to refer to the team with the old name, and now here the problem you may have some folks, and who knows which way this is going to go. Maybe folks will start hoarding Redskins gear now because they think the name's going to change, so actually see an increase in revenue. Or maybe people will stop buying it because they think, you know what, there's going to be a new name soon. I'm just going to wait and buy my jersey once they change the name.
Brady Quinn seems to be focused, obsessed with Johnny Manziel off the football field. I know Brady was with the Browns. Does that make him an authority to comment on Johnny Manziel? Well,
it does to a certain extent, because I can recall Brady Quinn getting himself into a couple of awkward situations when he was a rookie in the NFL, and that's the knee-jerk Browns fan reaction, other than the fact that, hey, Brady, you're concerned about Johnny Manziel's off-field activities. We're concerned about your on-field abilities, which weren't very good, or he'd still be the quarterback of the Browns. But Brady was involved in a few things, not the inflatable swan or the spraying champagne or the money phone or any of that. But the point is, and Brady Quinn's grown and he's evolved. Remember, Dan, after Javon Belcher had that incident, the murder-suicide in Kansas City, and Quinn was the quarterback of the Chiefs at the time. He had those very poignant remarks after the game. A lot of people gained a new perspective and respect for him. So, 7 years later, the guy's grown, the guy's evolved, and maybe we should listen to the impact of Manziel's behaviors away from the field on all those kids out there who are going to buy that number 2 Browns jersey and try to emulate Johnny Manziel.
No matter what happens with Manziel, we're never going to say that he didn't have the talent to succeed in the NFL. Right? If you succeed in the SEC at that high of a level, I think that his success or failure will be attached to off the field, which I don't know how fair that's going to be to frame it that way, but I think that's what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, I disagree, because I think it's going to come down to whether or not he can get up consistently after he's banged around by NFL caliber defensive players. And there's an instinct that I think you have to keep yourself healthy at the NFL level. Russell Wilson has it. He knows how to absorb a hit. He doesn't avoid hits. He knows how to absorb a hit like Barry Sanders used to. What happens with Johnny Manziel, he gets banged around. He got banged around by Duke. You get banged around by Duke, good luck week 1 if you're the starter.
But this is perception and reality, Mike, is what I'm talking about. If he gets banged around, well, he's not studying the tape. He hasn't learned from what he did in the SEC. He's partying too much. I think people will attach it to him, whether it's true or not.
I agree with you on that. Anything that, however he would fail, whether it's injury, whether it's a Brett Favre chuck it deep and somebody picks it off, and just anything that looks other than how you expect a franchise quarterback to behave, whatever the outcome, the reason will be.
Yeah,
it's because he doesn't spend enough time working on his craft. I agree with you on that. I don't know that that's fair, but you're right. Perception is reality.
One other thing, this Aaron Hernandez story, where his lawyers may subpoena members of the New England Patriots front office?
Well, they're fishing for anything they can to try to create reasonable doubt. And the one thing we learned from the OJ Simpson case, reasonable doubt is a powerful tool, and you can conjure it out of anything and everything. So now, as they finally have a trial date, October 6th, I believe, is when the trial is scheduled to begin. A year after Odin Lloyd is killed, we finally get a trial date. Now the goal is to come up with something, anything that could be used to make a straight-faced argument to a jury that there's reasonable doubt that Aaron Hernandez committed this crime at a time when all the evidence is pointing to Aaron Hernandez. Just like all the evidence 20 years ago was pointing clearly and conclusively and undoubtedly to O.J. Simpson, who ultimately was found not guilty.
You know, as a lawyer, you look back on 20 years ago with that trial. How did that happen? That it seemed like it was just there on a tray for you as far as the prosecutors.
Well, it happened because they made the mistake of letting him slide his fingers into that glove, and he was very adroit in his ability to spread his fingers just enough to make that glove not fit. And there you go. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. One of the great catchphrases of all time, and that overcame DNA evidence that, if I recall correctly, Dan, it was like 1 in a billion that it wasn't him. Something ridiculous like that. That all got thrown out. That all got rejected. That all got overturned. And reasonable doubt, a system set up to keep innocent people from going to jail allowed a guilty man to walk away.
Okay, but could you have had O.J. try on those gloves behind the scenes first, not in front of a jury?
Well, yeah, there had to be a better way to do it than what happened, where all of a sudden O.J.'s there and he's spreading his fingers as wide as he can. It's like the glove doesn't fit. Yeah, just not the best way to execute a trial by the prosecution. And you know what? When you feel like you've got it nailed down, there's an opportunity to get a little arrogant, get a little complacent, and that's the thing about criminal trials. All it takes is that one little opening, and a guy who seems to be completely guilty can end up walking away.
All those acting roles came into play there for O.J. I love that he's shocked that they don't fit when he puts it on. He's looking at him going, these are mine.
Why don't they fit?
Man, part of you is going like, damn, these gloves, I'm going to take these back. They don't fit me. They fit me a couple of weeks ago. Oh, man. All right, Pro Football Talk with Mike Florio tonight at 5:30 Eastern. Thank you, Mike.
All right, see you, buddy.
All right, profootballtalk.com.